Welcome to Mother Murderer Podcaster, where we celebrate the most outrageous and the best made for TV movies of the 80s and 90s.
Hi, I am Katie Madonna Lee, a filmmaker.
And I'm Lewis Jordan, a writer. And just like the tagline for this movie that we're covering, I have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and I'm a homosexual. This episode, in honor of Brendan Fraser's new movie, The Whale, which is out this weekend, when we're recording, we are covering the 1997 Showtime TV movie, Twilight of the Golds, starring the beautiful, the talented, the widely beloved Brendan Fraser, Gary Marshall, Jennifer Beals, Rosie O'Donnell, and the legendary Faye Dunaway. Now, we'd wanted to cover something of Brendan's Fraser's for a while because we both love him. And in fact, our first venture into podcasting was a sort of, an attempt at a podcast where we were going to go through his movies and where we went through some of his movies called Renaissance, and that we did during lockdown. I had what was it? I saw George of the Jungle, and it just activated something in me, some deep-seated thing where I was like, oh, I love him.
I remember. I remember.
Yes.
We did, the three movies we did were Encino Man,
Mm-hmm.
School Ties,
Yes.
and Airheads.
Yes. And now he's got this new Darren Aronofsky movie, The Whale, out, which seems to be it's doing well at the box office from what I can see, and it's got pretty good reviews. Not everybody is completely sold on the Darren Aronofsky part of the movie, but everybody is sold on the Brendan part of the movie. Everybody says that he gives a fantastic performance. Just some people aren't thrilled about the direction or the writing or things like that, but everybody's saying he should be nominated for an Oscar. He's the front runner for the Oscar. So
I hope he gets it, because in our the thesis of our podcast, just so you know, was that Brendan Fraser was the represented the millennial journey like no other. He was, he was booming in the 90s like we were, and everything was going great until 2008. Then everything just started getting really bad. And I feel kinship to that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And I would like, him to get the respect he's entitled to, as Faye would say. Mommy Dearest. I still never saw The Mummy because I was like a full-blown communist. I know. Like I told you, I never saw George of the Jungle. I never saw The Mummy because I was like a full-blown anti-consumerist. Everyone who goes I was very if it isn't a foreign film or a documentary or an independent film, it is not cinema. I've changed. I've calmed down.
Yeah. You would The Mummy is really fun. It's so much fun. It's just like an old school just action romp. There's something very classic feeling about it. I can see why everybody loves it. And then don't bother with the sequels because they're diminishing returns. Like how a lot of sequels are. But anyway, so Twilight of the Golds is the Golds are a liberal, upper middle class Jewish family. Walter, who's played by Gary Marshall, who directed Pretty Woman and lots of other movies, and Phyllis, played by Faye Dunaway, who needs no introduction, fuss over their children, Suzanne, Jennifer Beals, Flashdance and the L Word, and David, Brendan Fraser. Suzanne is the perfect daughter. She married a nice Jewish geneticist, Rob, who's played by John Tenney, and works at a clothing store with her best friend Jackie, played by Rosie O'Donnell. But she's indecisive with no sense of identity. David is the family's black sheep. He's gay, he's an opera director, and he lives in the city with his boyfriend, Stephen. And so the family is gathered to celebrate Suzanne and Rob's wedding anniversary. And while Walter and Phyllis adore Suzanne's husband, they've never invited David's boyfriend to any family gathering. And they act like David being gay isn't an issue, but there's tension there. So David is directing an updated version of Wagner's The Ring cycle. And the last work of the cycle is called Twilight of the Gods. So the title is a pun on that. But his news is overshadowed when Suzanne announces that she's pregnant, and everybody's thrilled. Suzanne's husband, Rob, is working on a project that genetically tests fetuses for a wide variety of traits, from disabilities to diseases to sexual orientation. And against her better judgment, Suzanne gets the test. Her baby is in perfect health, but there's a 90% chance that he'll be, like David, quote unquote, homosexual. And all hell breaks loose. Suzanne is thinking about getting an abortion. She goes to her parents for guidance, but neither of them, her mother won't tell her what to do one way or the other. Her father's pushing her towards the abortion. She asks them to not tell David, but Phyllis tells him anyway. And David is furious that Suzanne is considering, aborting her child just because he's gay. And so he confronts his parents and he says, "Would you have done the same with me if you'd have known?" And his mother kind of denies it, but it's not that convincing. And then his father outright admits that he would have. And there's this really intense moment where he's like, "You want to know what I think? I think that you're sick and diseased. And if there were a cure, I'd want you to be cured." And it's like a slap in David's face. So he's horrified and he cuts his parents out of his life. And he tries to convince Suzanne not to get an abortion, but she won't commit one way or the other. And so slowly Suzanne starts to have opinions and grow a backbone. And she finally confronts her husband and says, "So do you want this baby or not?" And her husband admits that he doesn't want a gay child. And if she decides to have it, he wants a divorce. So Suzanne goes out to a bar with a gay coworker to ask him about what it was like growing up gay. And then he's gay bashed outside the bar. And Suzanne gets knocked over in the scuffle. And she's rushed to the hospital and she might lose the baby. And with the threat of losing her child, that makes Suzanne finally decide that she wants to keep her baby. And even if that means losing her husband. And so Suzanne and the baby recover. And then she and her parents attend the premiere of David's production of The Ring. And he sees Suzanne's heavily pregnant, so he knows that she's decided to keep the baby. And Walter and Phyllis ask David to let them in his life again. And he sees that they've kind of grown past their prejudices and they've worked to accept his boyfriend as part of the family. So he agrees to give them another chance. And Suzanne, then they show Suzanne now divorced, raising her gay baby, and everybody lives happily ever after. And so it's very much a message TV movie. This is 100%, message. And it was based on a play originally, that I think it was 1994. And at first or 93. And at first it played in Los Angeles, and it got great reviews there. But for some reason, once it went to Broadway, the play just bombed and closed in, like 20 something performances. But they'd already sold the rights for the movie because based on the success of the Los Angeles run. So a couple of years later, they've got this TV movie. And so I figured the first thing that we should talk about is, why we're here, Brendan. And what did you think about him in this movie?
I thought he he really passed as gay. I believed him. I mean, he looked really good too. So I mean, he had a great body.
He shot this film right after he shot George of the Jungle, but before George of the Jungle was released. So he still had that George of the Jungle body. So this is basically like the peak of his beauty. This was the most beautiful that he ever was when he shot this.
Well, I think Airheads. I think he's gorgeous in Airheads.
Oh, he's gorgeous in Airheads. But I mean, he's like, he just had a whole like Disney makeover, with the body and the everything. And so
the spray tan.
Yeah, exactly.
He was very nuanced, very sensitive. And what I liked about it is it's clear that his character had a rich inner world and was semi-romantic and was romantic. I mean, he's an opera director, and he also is romanticizing, in many ways he's equating like, the struggle for love. I mean, that's a big thing for him, is like, integrity, being who you are, stepping through the fire and going after who you really are. That's important to him. But he did have I felt a very Cancerian vibe. Like he felt very water sign to me. Like he came off as being having a very deep, sensitive street, like inner world, but he also had a kind of passive aggressive shrug on his shoulder, which he's entitled to, but he had that little passive aggressive thing where he when he was at the table or at the couch, he was like, well, my boyfriend's never been invited. So, he would say like,
he was like, oh, Stephen would have come, but he wasn't invited.
Yeah, things like that.
I noticed that actually I was paying attention, and the way that it was written, you could, if you cast a different person with a harder edge in that part, that character could come off a lot bitchier and a lot more pissed off. But even when he's delivering dialogue that could be very pissed off, he's bringing this sensitivity and this likability to it. And I think that kind of he's adding dimension to the character that might, if you just play it as written, I think it's a lot angrier
and probably a little more self-righteous, like, oh, you kind of romanticizing their own trauma, which you see a lot of people do. Like like at the end, that scene where they show up at the opera and he's a little like standoffish, like, you know, when they want to apologize, he's like, oh, he's almost going to be like, it's too late, you know, no.
Yeah.
And, you know, Faye, his mother is like, come on, we're trying, you know.
Yeah.
And even his boyfriend has to convince him because he's like, you know, holding a grudge about it. And he's kind of like in his own, like, you said this to me, you know, you know, you hate me to my core and all those things, which, listen, I get. I'm not saying it's okay because like that scene with his dad is pretty brutal. But at the same time, like he's asking them, and I would never like because I know the answer. Like I know the answer.
Well,
that's not a good answer.
In that scene, his father says, you know, for a smart kid, you could be pretty stupid, and that's what he means is like, don't ask me this question because you're not going to like what I say. So
yeah.
But the parents are all about avoiding things, you know, they're all about you know, the father's always changing the subject when there's a problem. They're all about avoiding problems, and he's about, you know, bringing them up and talking about it.
I know where that comes from. That comes from being raised in a family who avoids problems and sweeps them under the rugs and act like they're not there. And yeah, no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought he did a great job of playing gay because he didn't play gay. You know, he just sort of played himself, you know, you know, he played a sensitive artist type. And, you know, they had the little, like, they gave him a little earring, you know, like, yeah, I thought that he really had the standout performance of the film and really brought the emotional center to the movie. He was the person that you could really relate to because this was not like a movie about people. This was a movie about it's a movie about issues, you know, and the people are they've got things that make them individuals, but ultimately it's about the issues. It's not about the people. And so having someone who's just so recognizably human and empathetic and likable, that we can hang on to throughout this whole thing, I think really made it work in a way that you know, so even though it's like, you know, it would have been nice if they could have cast, you know, a gay actor in the part, but that's it was 1997 and the only gay actors
sorry, go ahead. The only gay actors.
The gay actors that they had in this were like the coworker and the I guess the casting director for the opera, who are both complete like sissy archetypes, and those are both played by actual gay men. And then of course you had Rosie, who's actually gay, but she was deep in her like Mrs. Tom Cruise closet.
Yes, which you see on all the old Rosie O'Donnell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
But yeah, I thought that he was really good at knowing how to be like out of sync with the energy in the room. Like I noticed that he would do that every time. There would be the energy in the room, and then he would be different from that. He would be, you know, on a different level or on a different rhythm, just to emphasize with his family that he's the outsider. And yeah, and he had good chemistry with the guy who played his boyfriend. They were sweet together. It felt like, you know, a human relationship.
Yeah. And they only kissed, I think the first scene I was expecting, I was like paying attention to that since you brought it up
Yeah.
with, showing gay kisses and things like that in Philadelphia. And when they're talking about his rough night at home, they just kiss on the cheek. They don't have a show a real kiss between them until the middle of the movie, and it's like it's shot in such a way to like make sure we see it, instead of it just being like we're seeing Jennifer Beal and her husband kiss and cuddle and do all these things.
Yeah.
And even Faye and Gary Marshall are kissing each other and rubbing up against each other. But it seems to be a profound moment when Brendan and his boyfriend kiss. It's like, we're gonna kiss.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
the moment.
Like we're gonna show it. And
Tune in.
Yeah. And I liked little bits, like there are scenes where, not very effective comic scenes, where he's doing the auditions for the and then he's doing the auditions for the opera, and there are all of these really terrible auditions, and it's a little cringy, those scenes, but he's there's a woman who's having a panic attack, and he helps her calm down, and I was just like, oh, that's him. That's 100% him, being like, okay, let's breathe, and then being goofy and making her laugh. I was like, yeah, that's all him.
Yeah, I actually love those audition scenes. Were very funny, and I did love how this movie brought up, the Wagner, his, because in music that's always a reoccurring thing, is everyone brings up, is he a Nazi supporter? Was he anti-Semitic? And all these things. They constantly come up, and yeah, and they discuss that early on, right away, like the second scene of the first scene of the movie. They're already, he's like, defending Wagner, not defending his beliefs, but the music. And
I think that in the play, apparently they had this device where the actors would step out of the sets and they would go into this part of the set where it was like rocks and it looked like the set for The Ring, and then they would give these monologues that were sort of like outside of the reality of the play, and a lot of that stuff got cut. I didn't read the original, but I think they really tried to use the Ring thematically in this to tie it all together. And sometimes by having sort of pseudo operatic stuff in the soundtrack, which like works to varying degrees. But speaking of operatic, let's talk about Faye.
Yes. Okay. So I love Faye, and I am literally, I thought she did a great job. I actually believed her as a very overbearing, anxiety-ridden mother.
I think that she had the energy right and the emotion right and all of that stuff. The accent was a little, because it was like Gary Marshall didn't have that accent, but she went full on and was like, I hate that. But then when she would get very emotional, then she would drop it a little bit, and then she would be, you would hear her doing that mid-Atlantic movie star accent. I could hear that coming in sometimes. I mean, she really tried, but like during this very emotional scene, she's like, "Don't you speak for me," and it's like, there's Faye, there she is. And then she goes back to, oh, well,
but Gary Marshall's from the Bronx.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's, go ahead.
And it's so weird because he's not Jewish, and he always plays Jews, and he's Italian.
Really?
Yeah. I looked it up.
Really?
I found it in an interview where they talked to him about it. And he's like, yeah, just, he's for some reason, I think it's the New York thing.
I think
Just
so.
something about that that just reads as Jewish. And I get it. It's like, he pulls it off. He is, I think that Gary Marshall there's certain scenes where he's great. There are other scenes where I'm like, wow, he does like one note the whole time. Where he's like, hey, what are we doing here? Come on, let's eat. But I think he really gets it. He really knocks the big dramatic scenes, out of the park. And Faye, I think, I think that she's the best when she's in one-on-one scenes. Like there are these very intimate scenes that she has with Gary Marshall where she's like dyeing his eyebrows, or where she's just talking one-on-one with Brendan or with Jennifer Beals. And she's great in these sort of low-key intimate scenes. But I think it's when she has to start like freaking out in like a hospital waiting room and stuff like that, then that's when the accent starts to go. But otherwise, I think that she gives a good performance. I really do. I think that she gives a good performance. She looks 30 years younger than Gary Marshall. Like they put little white streaks in her hair, but like that, you're like, no. But you know what? Maybe she's supposed to be. Maybe she's supposed to be just, the younger. Why? I mean, it's not unheard of, a well-off doctor having a younger wife. So I would say that her accent, because she didn't need to do that accent. That was she I guess she was afraid of not coming off as Jewish enough, but nobody else was doing that accent. But she was like, she went for it. It was a choice that she made, and she pulled it off maybe 75% of the time.
Well, she gave us Faye. She gave us Faye.
She gave us Faye. She gave us, and that's the most important thing, is that, she really gave us that Faye, that energy and that nervous energy, that emotion. She gave us all of that. And it's very funny because Brendan Fraser went on the Rosie O'Donnell show to promote this movie, and they were talking, and he was, being himself, being like, oh, Rosie, you did such an incredible monologue and you gave such a good performance. And she did. I think Rosie gave a very good performance in this. She was 100% Rosie, nothing but Rosie. There was no attempt at a character. It was just Rosie, but she was great. But she says, yeah, and you worked with Faye Dunaway. And he was like, yes, that was interesting. She's such a legend. And this is a guy who has something incredible to say about everybody. He's heaping praise on this person, on that person. And so I have a feeling that there might have been a little something, who knows? I'm not allegedly.
I love Faye. Okay.
I love Faye too. I would never say that Faye is anything but amazing and a legend, and love her.
Phenomenal. She's phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So then we have Jennifer Beals, who I felt like for the first half of the movie, she didn't really register as much of anything at all. Other than being kind of bratty when she was talking with her brother. But she's playing somebody who doesn't really know who they are or what they want. So it's difficult to come off. Once she gets a backbone, I felt like then she started to show up, Yeah. And, but we already spent half of the movie with her just sort of like gazing off pensively into the distance with moist eyes. Are you as harsh on her performance as me?
No, I'm not, because I felt like she's in an ensemble piece with Faye Dunaway, Gary Marshall, and Brendan Fraser, and they're all pretty big things to contend with. I mean, Brendan is obviously like a heartthrob, and he's good looking, and he's got all these quiet undertones, and he has more real, he has the complicated character, the victim, like oh God, isn't it sad, where she's got kind of like dropped out of med school to be she's a manager at a retail store. She's married to, it on paper it sounds kind of boring, but I felt like she had the haircut, was the way she dressed was very like somebody who is, she brought the right energy to what she needed to do. She's an ensemble piece. I felt like, if she's going to be the the eggs, she's going to play the eggs, in the batter. Like she wasn't going to be,
and she was not recognizable as the girl from Flashdance at all.
No, and I think that was great because what's interesting is that shows what she can actually act. Like she's not just a body. And I think, no one, I thought when she was in Flashdance, I thought she was amazing. Anyway, I love her in Flashdance, but I think that she needed to bring everything inward because the character is very, to me, conservative. Is somebody who she's raised in a liberal coastal family, but I would say economically she's conservative. Like she seems like if she was my boss, she would be like, you're 5 minutes late. Why? And I felt like she played that character really well. I don't think somebody like a character actor like Rosie O'Donnell could play like that kind of character. And that's why she let Jennifer Beals, to me, was the, was kind of like letting the canvas to let everyone else shine. And she needed to be that inward, shy, quiet person who was kind of observing and questioning. I mean, you have to think she dropped out of med school after she worked so hard in undergrad, probably to get into med school. She decided she wasn't for her. I mean, so she's probably dealing with like this weird quitter. I couldn't do it, on the other hand. I thought she did that well. I don't know.
Well, her whole thing was about her getting to the point where she could step up and say, okay, I am strong enough to deal with this. Because I think that the implication was like that she quit med school because it was too hard, and she doesn't have faith in herself, and then through the course of the movie, she discovers faith in herself, and she's able to say, I can raise this kid on my own, and I don't need my husband around. Now, in the play, it was very different. The play ended with her character Suzanne getting an abortion, and then the abortion did not go right, and so then she is not able to have any more kids after that, because the whole thing was like, oh well, let's just get rid of this one and then we'll try again. And so it's like dun dun dun, and then David is just completely estranged from his parents, and it's a very dark ending. And I think maybe that's more, how things might have actually played out. And it's certainly an angrier ending, and I think that it was aimed, because it was on Broadway, it was in the theater, and I think that was aimed more towards gay audiences and New York audiences and LA audiences, people who could take something like that. But to have that ending in the TV movie, which is playing all across America, and in other countries. And I feel like this was not aimed at gay people. This was aimed at, sort of women, and it was attempting to engage with people who were like, oh yeah, sure, I love gay people, but then do you want your kid to be one? It was trying to engage with straight people. And so I think it had to show at the end, it's to sort of set an example and say that it's possible to do this, rather than this much angrier, maybe more truthful thing. It would have, in a way, in the mid 90s, it would have been almost irresponsible to have an ending like that for a TV movie, because you've got people raising gay kids watching that,
Well, why don't we talk about the 90s while we're here?
Yeah.
Because I showed my mom the tagline and she was like, what the like what? And I was like, Mom, remember in the 90s, like they thought gay, that's the whole thing, is like coming from Reagan era, like AIDS, everything in the 90s was, do you have AIDS? Like people were like gay equals AIDS. And that's one thing the movie was very ambiguous about, was when he was eating like a cookie, she was like, oh no, don't share a cookie with him. Don't, Faye Dunaway's like, doesn't want him to share a cookie with his sister. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why? Now they never stated, okay, he's HIV positive, he's just gay.
Well, yeah, he isn't.
But
he says that out. He says that outright. He says, every time that I lose a little bit of weight, you people think that I've got HIV. So he doesn't have it, but it's that his mother just thinks that he might have it and that he's going to give it to, it's just the fact of him being gay in their minds means that he's probably got it.
Yeah. And to me, that kind of, I think a lot of very sheltered people who thought they were liberal or whatever, or just sheltered people in general with AIDS and the impact that it had on people in the 80s that grew, I would say baby boomers, people who remember life, who came of age before AIDS. They probably, maybe if they weren't a part of the gay community and they didn't even know anything about AIDS, gay people, maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't grow up like that. I grew up around knowing very clearly AIDS was caused by HIV, and you got it from blood transfusions, sharing needles, and very, unprotected
sex.
And so I mean, I knew that from like age 6, 7, whenever the Ryan White story came out. So like I knew for a long time. But but you could see that in a middle America, not even a middle America. I'm so over that, because this is a New York thing. Because people in Florida, people in LA, people in La Jolla, California, coastal, I'm sure that they're bigots too. So they're all over. They're not.
Yeah. And that's
part of
the point of this, is that they could have made it a normal family from Ohio, but they intentionally made it a well-off Jewish liberal family, which I think that I couldn't really tell where they're supposed to be, because I think it was shot in Canada or something. So I'm like, is this supposed to be New York or Chicago or what?
I think it's New York, because the opera, they have a lot of singers. They have
but like a liberal New York Jews. So that was a very intentional thing. And I'll say that watching this movie, it was sometimes uncomfortable as a gay man, watching these people just react to the fact that their son would be gay as if it was the worst thing that could have happened. And I was like, fuck you, lady.
Yeah. Me too. Me too, because I should be so lucky. I was like, oh my God, I wish I had a gay son. Are you kidding me? I would are you kidding me? We'd have so much to bond over. We have so much to do. Like I feel like that is like what I was be prepared to do. I wouldn't be prepared to have like a conservative football playing son. I wouldn't know what to do. I would
to
like
have
have a
straight
nervous
son
breakdown.
being like, bang, bang, I'm shooting everything, you know?
I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why don't you like Olivia Newton-John like as much as I do?
But there was something, it's like the thing that really hit me, it wasn't so much that, but it was the way that David was just sort of tolerated within the family. They kind of make fun of his career. They don't invite his boyfriend. They always are worried that he might have AIDS. You know, they can only stand him when there's this sort of conspiracy among them to not mention that he's gay. And I have felt that, you know, from my own relatives, that it's like, as long as I don't say anything about it, then it's okay. But then if I mention a boy, even just mentioning a boyfriend, or there's something about it that to certain people, it's like it's distasteful, you know, it's like you just talked about anal sex at dinner. It's like, it's a little gross, you know, and then, but then, you know, heterosexual relationships are like always a good thing, and they're never seen as gross, even when it's like the woman's pregnant and you're like, oh, clearly they were fucking, but she's got a baby. But there's always got to be something kind of like sexual and a little like weird about gay relationships. And you know, and David is like the bad one in his family, and I am also the bad one in my family. And it really, I felt like the key to this whole movie for me was the scene where Gary Marshall tells Brendan's character how he really feels, because I was like, well, what answer would I get if I asked that question? I don't really know, but I kind of have a feeling, and I feel like it might be the same one, you know? Now, I don't think that I would have the guts to ask that question, because I kind of like know the answer. And I think it would be different, you know, I mean, I don't think that both my parents would agree, but watching that scene just gave me like chills, because it's to have this person admit. I think there's too often you see people's feelings about gay people. It's even weird to use the word homophobia, because that implies that it has a whole set of implications, you know, just like but people's feelings about queerness, it's always shown as these rampant homophobes, or these people who are who just, you know, who hate gay people. But it's rare that you see someone who's like, we're liberal, we love gays, be like, actually deep down, I'm very uncomfortable with this, and I don't think that it's right, but I'll never admit it unless I'm forced to. And in a way, it almost, I would never say that this is on anywhere near on the level of a film like Get Out, but it's got that same sort of thing where it's like, oh, these are like the nice, rich, white liberal people, but underneath all of that, this is how they really feel. And I have felt that. And so it was that, I don't know if it made me feel good, but it made me feel seen, you know, that just because I have experienced that same thing where, like, you know, I was never going to get kicked out of my house, but I certainly knew that, like, it was not okay for me to be gay. It was like, it was a little, and like, we're not going to tell you that, but we're going to think it. We're going to maybe say it in private. So that, and I mean, like, there's a line where Suzanne, it says, "Oh, I wish it was deformed." And I was like, oh, that just hits you straight in the heart. Because it makes me go back and think, like, think about when I was a kid and I was asking for Barbies on Christmas and stuff like that. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what were the conversations that my parents were having behind closed doors when I was just running around with a blanket on my head being like, this is my long, beautiful hair. Do you like my long, beautiful hair? Um, which, and like, I've gotten to the point where, like, I'm okay with that, like, I'm no longer embarrassed about that stuff. I'm like, that kid was doing exactly what he wanted to and what came naturally, and isn't that wonderful? And there's nothing wrong with it. But
yeah,
it's so, that's a real thing to get over, is the way that you feel about yourself is very much mirrored from the way that other people act towards you. And
yep.
and you don't necessarily need somebody saying, no child of mine is going to be homosexual, get out of here, to make you feel shitty about yourself. And so I really thought, this is when a TV movie that has such an obvious a message TV movie like this can really be a great thing, because I really can't think of that many other times when I've seen something like this shown in that same way.
I don't think I've seen that either in a movie, because I think in this particular movie, what no one ever talked about, which I thought was interesting, that they did a genetic test. And I'm like, well, so the child is born gay.
Mm-hmm.
That means it's something that they can't, it's not, it's a trait. It's a trait like blue eyes or
Mm-hmm.
Big teeth. I don't know. But to me, that was something that was they never sat back and were like, oh, so that's interesting that it really is a biological phenomenon and it isn't this, behavior. That's they never sat there and did that the whole movie, which I thought was interesting, is like, they never were like, wow, do you know how groundbreaking this is that we can test for homosexuality? Isn't that fascinating that we've discovered that, there's a brain, there's a whole wiring. I thought that was something that just they never confronted, or they never really openly discussed in the whole thing, because I was like, oh, so it confirms that you're born that way.
Yeah, there was almost like a bit of a sci-fi element to it, where because it's this futuristic thing. We still don't have that. So it's this little like sci-fi element to the story.
Yeah, and that was something that was very bizarre to me, because I was thinking this should confirm to you that then if this is what, then you're fine. And I don't know. I thought, for me, I am glad, like, for you, when I was watching those scenes, it was very cringy. Like, I was cringing because I was thinking, for somebody who I was, for the audience at home, I was abandoned by my dad's side of the family, but and I was the only like grandchild in that side, and they wanted nothing to do with me because, like, I still don't know, but I think it has a lot to do with me just being a woman. They're really misogynistic, and they're obsessed with football, Notre Dame football, and they just were not interested in having a loud, flamboyant, very flamboyant child. And so my mom would always say, I wish we had a brother for you. And I'm like, oh my God, no, because he would have been so gay and so brutalized by my dad, because my dad would call me a sissy. My dad was not, my dad would call me like, a wimp. Don't let them see you cry, blah, 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 and that's why I would always be a sore loser at sports events, you know, because like I knew I was going to get yelled at, but at least he showed up. I mean, a lot of dads didn't show up at all, you know. But he was trying to make me like to be something I wasn't. Like he wanted, you know, when I was real little, it was okay for me to be a girl, you know, but when it was like time when I was showing symptoms of womanhood, it was like not okay. He wanted me to be really tough. And he wanted me to be thin. He wanted me to be all these different things that I wasn't. And because he really it was very patriarchal and, you know, it's full of contradictions, but
it's that same thing of instead of accepting you as the way that you are, the parent is always seeing you as a problem because you're not the way that they had hoped that you would be, instead of just being like, well, I guess this is how they are. And that, yeah. And then always feeling, you know, then that gets to you and you internalize that and that becomes a thing. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a thing. It's such a thing. It's such a thing, you know, like, I mean, I've always been an inquisitive, curious person, you know, I come to that like, oh, what's that? What's that? But, you know, I'll start something and if I'm not the best at it, then I have to stop because there's no point. Because I go right back to that place, you know, when I'm like 11 and 12 and I'm trying to be good at sports. I'm trying to care about it. I'm trying to even care. Like I didn't care. I wanted to be on at Melrose Place. Like I wanted to wear spandex. You know, it was always sports. I couldn't be in dance. I couldn't be in gymnastics. I had to do butch things that I was not good at. I would like, you know, I wasn't terrible, but I definitely wasn't amazing. You know, wasn't going to get invited to the travel team or anything. Or I also didn't care. Like I was like not emotionally involved in it.
I don't know. Yeah, the ending of it when everybody just sort of accepts, when the parents are like, we're gonna do the work to change ourselves and genuinely accept you and your partner, and that the ending got to me. And then seeing, you know, even though it's so, but like Suzanne going around at the end with the baby on the playground totally made me tear up. You know, because and there's this idea that, you know, he says that the fire, you know, that the ring, it's all about this guy walking through the fire, and that the fire is imaginary and you'll walk through unharmed if you aren't afraid of it. And giving that whole message that just not being afraid of that, of what you're going to get having a gay child or just a different child or whatever, you know, that then that will be, because the thing that you always hear is people saying, oh, well, I just don't want you to have a difficult life. I just don't want you to have a hard life. I'm just afraid that you'll have a hard life. And then there's a moment where Faye and Brendan are fighting, and she says, you know, she knows what I went through with you. And he says, what did you go through with me? You know, and so it's just, I think I loved that. I loved that it had that message ultimately, because it's easy, I think, to say that you know, oh, well, we live in a very different world, and you know, and this is so 90s. And like, yeah, no, it is. And people wouldn't talk about it in the same ways. Like, it's very different, but in some ways it isn't. Like, you know, it's not polite to say that you don't like gay people, but you know, and it's not AIDS anymore. It's like, we're groomers now, you know. And we can get married, and that what do you call it? You know, that act just got passed so that, if you get married in one state, then it'll be recognized in another. But, just a couple of weeks ago, some guy shot up a gay club. And then when his father was told that this kid shot up a gay club, then the father said to these news reporters that his first thought was, what was he doing in a gay club? And then when he found out that he wasn't gay, then he was like, oh, what a relief,
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah. That he, because he's like, because I'm a conservative. And it was that was the thing. It wasn't that he was shooting up a gay club, then he was horrified. He was like, what's my son doing in a gay club? So it's still, it's still there. This is still there. And, some of this stuff still applies, because I think it doesn't, AIDS was the name that they were putting on it at the time. But I think, just like you were saying, it's the fear of somebody different, of somebody who's different, of somebody whose experience is so different from yours. And people will come up with whatever reasons that they need to justify the fact that they're afraid of difference, but that's sort of what it boils down to.
I mean, I can tell you, I know quiet hate, and there's nothing I can do when I'm in the presence of, like, people from the loving, accepting, tolerant community of Notre Dame. I know they hate me. I know they're smiling at me, but they don't like me. And it's really creepy in that way, because that they don't like you, but they have to do the public relations to say that they accept, gay people, like, you're loved. They don't want you to commit suicide. You're loved. But it's definitely a sense of disdain, and they have the whole, you love this, you love the sinner but hate the sin type thing. And it's just but it is a quiet hatred, because to me it has more to do with, like, we're better because we're born normal, and there's something wrong with you. And that's been my issue with, the Irish Catholic, Notre Dame community my whole life, is like, they really don't like people who are different. And in the whole city, it filters through everything. Like, the violence there is so high because men are constantly trying to prove their,
manhood.
They're always using violence against women. It's just a very violent, angry place. And it has a lot to do with that whole, like, ooh, you're weird, you're different. Ew, don't be weird, don't be different. Because if you're weird and different, you're going to starve. We're going to come for you. It's not safe. It's not a safe place to be different. So if it's as accepting and loving as they say it is, then why is it like, if you are different, you will lose your job? You literally will. Work will be so unpleasant for you that you will have mental illness. You'll be bullied at work. You'll be outcast. You'll be overlooked for promotions. Like, you'll be treated like shit, And I see that a lot in South Bend. Like, all the queer people are doing all the undesirable jobs. All the different people, the more, more femme men are doing the more, they're doing CNA stuff. They're doing the like stuff that a lot
service
of people
jobs
don't want to do. And
but it still makes people uncomfortable in certain ways, and you have to do things to make them comfortable, like conforming to their expectations. And if you're doing a service job, being like really queenie, so that then they're like, oh yeah, it's like the gays on TV, it's fine,
Yeah.
This whole thing of trying to make people comfortable.
Yeah.
That's just exhausting.
It is. And it's demeaning because it kind of puts you in that feedback loop of, oh, I am the, the character who doesn't really have an identity or is allowed to be the main character until I am normal.
Mhm.
Normal. Normal would be, uh, for what wouldn't people consider normal for me is being married to a dude, to a
Yeah.
guy who does something, I don't know, something office something, and then doing something cutesy like on the side, like, like a
Having an Etsy
cupcake
store.
business or something. That is what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Like,
You should not be a
but
filmmaker.
should not be a filmmaker. And the thing is about it is that I shouldn't be a filmmaker. And even I get that from other women who are like, who undermine me on set. It's like, because they just don't want another woman that looks like me to be the boss. Like they want somebody different. And you do get these little jabs of people undermining you and people, but if I have a guy with me, they don't undermine me. If I'm supported by men, they don't. And I see that often. It's a continued thing. It's a way to be like when you're alone, uh people see, oh, she's by herself, I can get her. It signals like people want they have like this need to, if they see you're vulnerable, to pile on that versus lift you up. And I see that a lot with very weak-minded people. And unfortunately, there's more weak-minded people that have the power to destroy lives. And it's not something you can ignore because it does affect you. It affects your income. I wish my income was not dependent on whether or not people feel like they can bully me, but it is. And I think that has been the case for a lot of effeminate men who can't mask that they can't mask that they're feminine, they're
Yeah.
gay.
And I've
Um
certainly noticed, I think that I've tended towards jobs where I felt more accepted as a gay person, and that definitely, I, you know, went towards environments where I felt more comfortable, but that may not have been the thing that would have advanced me as much. And then I see guys will go on dates with and things like that, who work very heterosexual office jobs, who have created a persona to be able to get by in that then it's like they have to shed it by degrees until they can finally get rid of that work self. And there always seems to be a conflict between the work self and the real queer self, and being able to let that out. And I'm glad and I'm lucky that at this point I don't feel like I have that, and I can just be myself in all contexts. But not everybody has that. So it's still, it's still, as much as it seems like everything is fine, even in New York City, there's still code switching. There's still all of that stuff. You still got to be careful.
Well, we have to discuss this. It's really important because you were saying, oh, I'm lucky to be in a place where I can be integrated as myself, but you're also leaving out the fact that you had to work your ass off to get there because it wasn't given to you.
Yeah.
You had to, and we discussed this the other night about how in order just for you to be you have to live in a very expensive city. Like,
Yeah.
for me, like, because I'm relocating to a different area, that's cheaper because the city I live in is one of the most expensive cities in Indiana because it has great arts culture, and it's very super liberal, you know. And but with that comes high rents and a lot of service jobs, you know, because it only has like a certain amount of like academic jobs, and I'm not academic. So you know, it's like you always have to like, because if you hadn't decided, okay, I'm going to stay in New York, and you were like had to live in South Bend, you know how that would affect you. You couldn't, you know, it's horrible. So I think that you had to really work hard at it to be integrated to where you are. I don't think it was just like, don't, you know, I think oftentimes what is dangerous in these feel good, you know, 90s and early 2000 dramas of people, I moved to the city and I found my family, I have a found family. Okay, that's nice and sugary and all this shit, but the truth of it is you may have like a group of friends that have found family, but they're not going to pay your rent, and they're not going to pay your bills, and they're not going to probably be your emergency contact, you know. And oftentimes you may live so far apart from each other you might never see them, you know. But it's not like all like you move there and then everything, it's still a hard concrete jungle, you know.
Yeah, but it's true that you have to pay, literally pay in money and in comfort and various other things for the privilege of being able to be yourself. And even then it's, you know, there's trade-offs, and there's how much of yourself can you be when, and all that stuff. But and it does, you really have to commit to being okay with yourself. You know, you really have to, because there's a moment in the movie where Brendan's character is like, I've had to go through so many difficult things. Why am I fighting for this kid to go through those same things in any way? What's so great about me? And then his boyfriend says to him, well, I think that you're pretty great, and I think that we'd be better off having more of you in this world. And it's like, you have to either have somebody telling you that, or you have to tell yourself that, or both, because, you know, you're constantly getting these messages from culture, from people, or whatever. So yeah, it's a thing that you've got to work at. But you know, I think it's worthwhile. You know, I would never say that this was a perfect 10 out of 10 movie. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that felt that felt forced about the plot, things that didn't work. I wasn't always thrilled about the score. I thought it could be intrusive and lousy sometimes.
Can we please talk about the score? Because
okay.
I don't know if it was the director's choice or if it was the composer's choice. I don't know, but it was like, cue the melodrama here. It was so tonally ruining it was very intrusive, and came in and was like, isn't it sad? Her son is gay.
And there was
theme again.
And there would be like a woman playing a guitar going la 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 la.
Oh, and it was like they were trying to do a Rosemary's Baby, like, you know how like like I was sitting there like, oh, and another thing that really bothered me was they have a whole scene with just sound of them chewing.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you before. I was like, this sounds like an ASMR video.
It does. I was sitting there like, what? Why are they just why? Like, not only is that horrible to listen to, it's expensive. The Foley art and to get the sound right.
Like, and they weren't getting it right because they were clanking their utensils when they weren't using their utensils. Okay. They were chewing when they weren't chewing. I was like, this is just badly done post. and I was like, am I watching a mukbang video here? Jesus. But it was, so there were definitely things like that. This is definitely a TV movie. This is not a perfect movie in any sort of way. But I would say that I've got affection for it, because even in the ways that it doesn't work as a movie or as a plot or any of that stuff, it gives you these certain moments, these certain conversations or lines or scenes that just really resonate, and you go, oh, damn. And the rest of it is just sort of like scaffolding for those moments. But those are the things that stick with you. And some of those things will stick with me.
Likewise, I think the conversation that we had about it will stick with me, and some of the things you shared and resonated with you will stick with me. And I'm glad that we picked this movie so that you could talk about that, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot. Sorry.
No, thank you. And then that all kind of dovetails nicely into our Mary Catherine Gallagher monologue, which is going to be a dialogue. Now, every episode we do the Mary Catherine Gallagher monologue, which is based on the superstar character Mary Catherine Gallagher from SNL, played by the amazing Molly Shannon, who is obsessed with TV movies and always says that she can best express her feelings in a monologue from a TV movie. And it's funny because, this is a movie with Faye Dunaway. You would think that there would be a big camp moment for us to do, but there really weren't any big camp moments. And so I settled on a pretty straightforward scene between Suzanne and David. The background for this is that David has found out about this testing that Suzanne is considering having an abortion. They've talked about it once, and she said, you can't force me to make a decision. So now this is his like last ditch effort to try to talk some sense into her. And so he shows up unannounced at her job. And then this is the scene. Do you have the sides?
I'm looking right at it.
Okay.
Yeah. We're closing now. What are you doing here?
That seems to be the question. What if Michelangelo's mother thought the same way that you do? What if Tennessee Williams' mother did? Or Herman Melville, Cole Porter, Martina Navratilova? What if Stephen Hawking's mother didn't want a handicapped child? Or Orson Welles's didn't want a fat one?
This is all theory.
The point is, you've got to stop looking at this as some sort of curse. What it is a challenge.
I don't have the strength for it. I wish I was as strong as you are, but I'm not.
Yes, you are. You just haven't found it yet because you haven't had any reason to. You could live the life that we were programmed for. And I couldn't. And I had to figure that out. And that was my gift. And maybe this is yours. This is your chance to find your own greatness.
You're not being fair.
Well, neither are you.
Look, David, I know how hard your life has been. I've heard you tell me how lonely and scared you were. I've heard you talk about people with AIDS, people getting bashed. I'm not going to put somebody else through that.
Don't make me regret sharing my problems with you. Everybody has problems.
Oh, not like that. They don't. Now, why isn't it more humane for me to wait until I can bring a child with no disadvantages into the world?
Because we lose too much. Because everything that you love about me is tied to that one element that makes you queasy. Every human being is a tapestry. And if you pull one thread, then the whole fucking thing falls apart and you wind up staring at the walls. Scene.
Good job.
You know, that scene got to me when I watched it. And that's another thing where that scene could be played very angry and confrontational. And every time Brendan Fraser brought it back to a sort of tenderness, and that just made it so effective. You know, those great big eyes of his. And no matter what, you know, Brendan Fraser in 1997 with hair falling over his eyes and wire-rimmed glasses, you know, I mean, that and a roof over my head is all that I need.
He's a Sagittarius.
Yes, and I get along with Sagittarians. Yes. Clearly. So then that's our show. And
that's our show.
We've got oh yeah, and go see The Whale. You know, if you're a Brendan fan like us, or you just I don't know, we're curious or whatever, you know, I'm going to go see it in the next couple of days, try to, you know, throw a little money that way, have a good cry in the theater. And yeah, hopefully be there cheering him on Oscars night.
I don't watch the Oscars, but I hope he wins. I don't make me watch the Oscars.
No, I won't. No, I'll text you.
Okay. But remember to head on over to our YouTube page if you want to watch this, since maybe you are right now. Like, subscribe. We also have a bunch of random TV movies and found footage on our YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at Mother Murder Podcaster, TikTok Mother Murder Podcaster, and on Twitter at Mother Murder Podcaster.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.